Welcome to another Tech Stuff Tuesday. This week I'm going to tackle a question that I have been asked tons of times, almost weekly. What specs should I look at when I go to buy a sub? Or I'm looking at different subs. What should I look at to determine which sub I should get? And that's kind of a loaded question. There's a lot of things that you should be looking at, a lot of things that you shouldn't be looking at. And then it also kind of rolls into truth in advertising. Is everything that they're claiming actually correct? And I want to first thank the partnership that is making this video possible. This guy. It's an OBD2 scanner from Nanda that monitors your vehicle health. You can scan codes, you can clear codes. It can tell you what all of those codes are that you might have for a check engine light, and much, much more that I'll cover in a future video. But currently, you can get this for free on Amazon. It's 50 bucks. You can get this for free by following the link in the description below. So, on to the video. Now, I'm going to use something brand new that has no prior stigma, no other reviews, anything indicating good or bad. And I'm going to compare it to one of our products so I can point out what you're getting versus what is claimed, and even compare performance in the real world of what you're getting from those specs. And this is what we're going to be testing against: the new Rockville Punisher 12D2. Now, some have been saying that this is the replacement to the K9. I don't know if it exactly is. It does look very similar to a K9. It's a little bit bigger than a K9, and it's rated for a little bit more power than a K9. So maybe this is their replacement to it. I don't know. I'm not going to claim that, but what I can say is I bought this with my own money. I did not hide where it was going. It says it right there, going to EMF Audio, right on the shipping label. On the billing, it also said EMF Audio. Everything about it said exactly where it was going. And I ordered directly from the Rockville website, but it shipped from Audio Savings. So they are one in the same. If you order directly from Rockville, I want to make sure I got the absolute newest, latest, greatest, best, whatever they had to offer from there, and it came from Audio Savings. So make of that what you will. But this is what we're working with. They definitely know that they sent it to me. Didn't hide anything. And we're going to start from the very beginning of everything with this. You can see it is unopened. And we've got a net weight and a gross weight. The net weight should be the weight of the sub. The gross weight should be the weight of shipping. So packaging, everything. So the first thing that we're going to check is the actual weight, because why not? We're just checking everything to make sure that if you say you're getting a 41.0 pound sub, that you're actually getting a 41 pound sub. That is 42.2 pounds. Shipping weight of 43.2 pounds. So we're a pound short on shipping weight. That's not off to a good start. I guess from this point we should probably take the sub out, weigh it, and see if we get 41.0. And what have we got in the box? We've got a product warranty card, all the parameters, some various things on here, wiring diagram. I might have to check this to make sure if it's actually accurate. And we'll definitely be taking a look at this here after we weigh it. And we've also got a cutout diameter, which this should be an accurate template, which I think, again, we may have to check just to make sure. Now we don't want the sub to stick to the metal here, so we've got the foam, but you'll see it does read 0 pounds, and actually we're going to turn it off, clear it, turn it back on just to absolutely make sure. We are zeroed. And we have got a 38.8 pound sub. Yes, the box said 40.2 and 38.8. So that's not accurate either. Okay, so in comparison to the Lowballer, obviously it's going to weigh what I say it weighs because I'm the one who weighs it. I don't rely on somebody in China to tell me how much it weighs. I actually put it on a scale and weigh it. So you're buying a sub based off the weight alone. One, that's how you know it's a crap sub. Never buy a sub based on its weight, especially if they advertise it as a feature of that. So I did the cutout. As you can see, I have cut it out. Imagine that. If we sit it on top here, we're relatively close. If you were going to invert this sub and you actually use this diameter cutout, you would probably have a problem with the surround rubbing. Just as a point of reference, that isn't how they are intended to be mounted, so you can't fault it there. Now if we flip the sub over and we take our cutout, it actually does fit the basket quite well. So we don't offer a template like this. We just tell you the diameter of our subs. But if you do want to trace this template, it does actually fit. So now we can move on to the rest of the specs and some things that I suspect are a little bit wrong. So now we're going to take a quick look at the sheet that is supplied with it, and we'll probably compare the website a little bit. And again, we're comparing the Lowballer line of ours to this sub because it's at the same price point on pre-order. So the Lowballer, the original one, we've discontinued. The revision 1 is actually ready for a little bit more power. It's a little bit different. Basically the same sub. We are pre-ordering the 12 at $140 plus shipping at the time of this taping. Now, also at the time of this taping, you can buy this exact sub for $140 free shipping. So think about this in terms of just what you're getting in general. You go, man, that sounds like an incredible deal. But they're factoring in the cost of shipping into what you're getting. Is it really free? No, they just built it into the price. So what if you're on the West Coast and you're paying $40 or $50 shipping because it's coming from the East Coast? Or they're wrapping into and figuring out the cost there. You're buying a $100 sub that is like this. So just put that in the back of your head. Does this sound like too good to be true? Or, yeah, that sounds accurate. That's your call. Just know that you're essentially buying a sub that they're retailing for $100 when you're paying the $140 with free shipping. So we're going to compare here. Right out of the gate. You've got 1400 watts RMS CEA rated. Oh, Jesus, here we go again. 2800 watts program, 5600 peak. If you watched the last video, which will be right there, 1400 CEA, here's what we're going to end up doing. I'm going to test this at 1400 watts because that's one of the ratings. And if it's fine on 1400 watts, I'm going to test it on 2800 watts. And I'm not going to worry about peak. It's a BS number. We don't even put it on any of our products. Now, from a spec standpoint, yes, this is rated higher than the Lowballer, and it's lower than the Banhammer V2, which could be a closer comparison, but not really, because there's so many things wildly different. So we've got cast aluminum frame, ultra stiff cone, ultra stiff dust cap, all things that were on the K9. Magnet weight, 15.38 pounds. They're advertising magnet weight as a selling point, but aside from that, 15.38 pounds. Remember when they said the sub was 41 pounds? There's over 26 pounds that would have to be made up in the soft parts and the basket. Baskets usually weigh a couple pounds. And this one, 2-3 pounds. The soft parts, I'll tell you exactly how much they weigh here in a little bit. And even according to their sheet, it's 355 grams or 337 grams, which we'll get into. So the magnet weight can't be right. It would actually be significantly higher than that, but they're advertising it as lower. Who knows? 3-inch 4-layer black aluminum voice coil. Haven't checked to see what color it is. It probably is aluminum. We'll get there. Frequency response is listed as the lowest FS when in series, but not in parallel. That frequency response, it essentially means nothing. They will play what the enclosure dictates and physically play whatever you put into it. Onto technical data. So we've got cutout diameter, 11.93 inches, or 11.22 inches on what we just test fit. 11.22 is accurate. 11.93 is not. 11.96 is the alignment for the screws for that diameter. So that's wrong. Mounting depth, dare I measure it? I might check that later. Then you get into the gap plate inside diameter, gap plate outside diameter, gap plate thickness, yoke outside diameter, yoke pole diameter, yoke thickness, washer diameter. Now some of these terms may not sound familiar to you, and that's because we don't use them in the United States. So this is an American company, and they're using terminology that China uses. So this is more or less saying that the top plate and back plate are 12 millimeters, which we can measure and see if that's correct. The gaps and all that stuff in the pole, I'd have to disassemble it for that, which obviously I'm not going to do while it's together. And then you've got the recommended box dimensions, which are sealed 1.24 to 2.12 and vented 1.94 to 2.83. So those are very large boxes. Everything that I design typically is not going to use that, except for when it's the much higher throw stuff, like the Bandhammer V2. And even then, that's way big, even for those. So we don't offer any of the motor dimensions. People don't really need to know that. It doesn't matter. So we don't supply it. So good on them for supplying it, even when it's the wrong information. Now, aside from all this, there are some things to note on their website that are in more detail. Like, this sub has our best cooling technology, which means even if you're entering competition and playing 1-minute test tones, it will handle it all day. You gotta know what's coming later in this video at this point. It has a thick aluminum ring near the T-yoke that absorbs and dissipates a ton of heat. That might be a little ambitious. We also use a much thicker T-yoke and washers, which also absorb the heat. Well, the motor can only accept so much heat before it's completely saturated, and then it won't absorb any more heat, and then your coil just cooks. Maybe we'll get to see a hot motor because it's absorbing all the heat. We'll look into that. The voice coil we use is 3 inches and rated to handle up to 250 degrees Celsius, which if you recall in the K9 video, it didn't. We may get to test that. I've got a few ideas of some various things that we're going to run here, and it may or may not survive enough to actually test the 250. But if we can, we will. And this sub is engineered and built better than other subs that cost twice the price. We're going to test that too, because the Lowballer, we're actually going to test a original release prototype, because that's all I've got on hand right now. We're going to compare that, which does not cost double the price and is rated for way less, and see how they compare. That will be an interesting result. There's a lot of buzzwords in these descriptions, and a lot of it is just kind of yammering. I haven't proofed to see what kind of English is in there with really dumb wording. But we do have the voice coil windings are made in the USA. So they're saying that it's a USA made coil that is sent to China, like it said on the box, put in the subs, sent back as a complete sub. And remember, this is still essentially a $100 sub. Just something to think about there. We also have the return of aluminum voice coils wound with OFC wire. If you missed it last time, it could be an aluminum former with OFC wire, but they already said over here that it's an aluminum coil, not a copper coil. And this is saying that it's an aluminum coil with OFC wire, which isn't even possible to begin with. Now, again, on the website, slightly different. This series is engineered from the ground up to keep voice coils cool so that even if you play test tones for long periods of time in a competition atmosphere, the sub can handle it. So it is intended for competition use. The website doesn't say 1 minute. The spec sheet does say specifically 1 minute. So we are absolutely going to play a 1 minute tone on rated power. All the other information with the cutout diameter that is wrong, and the other stuff is also on here the same, but wrong. And that leads us to the other information, like fail small parameters. And I know what you're thinking. You've been in here talking about this thing and you haven't tested anything yet. It's coming, and it's going to be glorious. So fail small parameters are listed separately for series and parallel. Now, some of your specs are going to change between series and parallel, but some of them should not. Now, I will also follow that up with any testing equipment that you're using. There's going to be a slight variance in the result that you get from device to device, from sub to sub, but you really should be within about 10% of every spec. Even if you run the same sub over and over and over, you might get just a slightly different result. Now, for the FS, that shouldn't be any different in series and parallel, because you didn't change the suspension, you didn't change the mass, you didn't change anything except for an electrical characteristic, which is wearing in series versus parallel. It's listed as 32 Hertz in series, 30 Hertz in parallel. Probably not accurate. The QMS should be basically the same. CMS should be the same, and they are different. BL should be different in series and parallel. You can't use BL by itself as a factor and figure out motor force. Yes, it's supposed to be a motor force specification, but when you are comparing subs, you should not go off of BL only. If you're going to compare the actual motor force, you want to use motor force factor, which is the BL number squared divided by the impedance, which will be the RE spec. You don't want to go off of nominal. You have to go off of RE, which is the actual DC resistance. So keep that in mind because it's a factor. That leads us to the RE, and they list it as the dual tool in 4 ohm plus or minus 0.2 ohms, and parallel is 1 ohm plus or minus 0.2 ohms. Well, that's not RE, that's nominal. Those are different things. So if you're going to go back and compare your BL squared divided by RE, you can't go off of that number because you don't know the exact number that all the other parameters come off of to make that comparison. It's wrong. Your QES shouldn't really change, and they have it listed here as 0.424 and 0.383. Your MMS, which is your moving mass, 355 grams and 337 grams. You didn't change the sub. You didn't change any mass, so you shouldn't get a different mass number. Like I said, from test to test, it should be reasonably close, and maybe that's out of tolerance on the test machine, but it shouldn't change. The dB SPL, that's going to be your efficiency, 85.3, 85.7. I can see that being a variance in testing. Your SD, which is your piston area, listed as the same. I have not checked to verify that that is accurate, but we can. QTS, 0.369 and 0.332. Didn't really see a change in that. It's a hair off, so it might be a little tolerance there. And the acoustic compliance, 26.273 liters and 31.33 liters, which again, it shouldn't be different because you didn't change the suspension. But here's the kicker. It's also listed as 0.47 cubic feet and 0.47 cubic feet. Is 0.47 cubic feet 26.273 liters, or is 0.47 cubic feet 31.33 liters? And the answer is neither. It is not either of those in liters. So the same number that's the same on both isn't even the right number for either. Or maybe it is. We're going to check parameters. Now, how are we going to check parameters? The same way that I do on all of our subs. I don't take someone else's word for it. I don't say, hey, build house, what are these specs? I get them in, I break the subs in to a reasonable amount, then I take the parameters, and that's what I publish. I don't know if this is broken in or not broken in. That's going to make a significant difference in if you're modeling anything and how it sounds and all that stuff. So what are we going to do? We're going to take this sub. I'm going to take parameters in series and parallel, spit out a result. I'm going to break the sub in, do the same thing, series, parallel, and see if that matches any of this, or at least is reasonably close. And the last thing on this sheet that probably should be addressed, that is a factor that you might be looking at, is Xmax. It lists 28 millimeters one way, 56 millimeters two ways. Makes sense. 28 times 2 is 56. That should be the case. We can figure out if that's accurate. We can look at this coil, we can measure the top plate, we can see the top of the coil so we know exactly if it's properly aligned, how long the coil is, and we can figure out, is that Xmax actually possible? So when you're comparing specs, what do people go to? They go to FS, and they say this is going to play low or it's not going to play low or something like that. You're going to go to QTS and determine what box is appropriate for it, or maybe even roughly a box size. Lower QTS is going to be a smaller box. Higher QTS is going to be a larger box. This is indicating that it's kind of right in the middle, right around the 0.33 to 0.37, which is what they're claiming, which is right in the neighborhood of it. Will work sealed and it will work ported. And they're both going to be pretty reasonable on box size either way. And you might look at the efficiency. Well, the other problem with their efficiency is it doesn't list if it's 2.83 volts or 1 watt per meter. And that makes a difference when you're looking at specs. Everything we list as 1 watt per meter. If you do 2.83 volts, when you have a different impedance, that's going to give you a different number, and that will throw it off a lot. 1 watt per 1 meter is going to match 8 ohms. So if you make 2.83 volts at 4 ohms, it's going to read 3 dB higher. At 2 ohms, another 3 dB higher. At 1 ohm, another 3 dB higher. So if you're comparing a dual 2 that's in parallel versus another one's a higher impedance, you could be 6, 9 dB difference on that efficiency number. It throws you way off in what is actually happening there. You want to make sure that you're looking at 1 watt per meter or 2.83 volts. This doesn't tell, so we don't have an exact comparison there, but we'll be able to tell when I take the specs off this sub. So we've covered the basic things that people tend to look at: power rating, Xmax, QTS, and sensitivity. Those 4 things are the most common ones I get questions about, and we're going to see if you should believe those things. Now, I've already done a video on how you shouldn't just look at sensitivity on subs, because that's not an indication of how loud it is. But we're going to find out the rest momentarily. Now, remember back when it said black aluminum coil? That looks like copper color to me. So it's either copper clad aluminum, which is not black in color, or it actually is a copper coil. I don't know which yet, but I did measure the top of the coil. So the coil comes up to about right here, just out of frame there is where the top of the coil is, and you got a 12 millimeter top plate, which I did verify is 12 millimeters. The problem is, if this is aligned correctly, then that means 19 millimeters on the coil length is right in the middle of the top plate. That means the bottom of the coil, after moving 19 millimeters, is going to be halfway through a 12 millimeter top plate. I mentioned the X-Max earlier, that it just has X-Max, but it doesn't say at what BL level. And the BL doesn't mention anything other than the one number. So BL can actually be measured at like 50%, 70%, 80%, 100%. And this tells you how much motor force is still happening when this is at full throw. We don't know that spec, and I typically do my designs to around 80% BL at that maximum throw. But here's the thing. You're probably going to be at or below 50% BL when the bottom of the coil is halfway through this gap. It physically won't have magnetism happening from the top plate, and that happens at 19 millimeters. So claiming that you have 28 millimeters is not physically possible. The coil itself is only 38 millimeters long. Yes, this has a larger surround on it, and the surround can handle it. And these spiders are 7.5-inch spiders. You know what also uses a 7.5-inch spider? A lowballer. You know what we rate the lowballer X-Max for? 19 millimeters. Yep. So this should be physically capable of delivering the same amount of X-Max as a lowballer, even though it's rated for 9 millimeters more, and physically cannot do it. Erroneous spec. Don't look at it. Some manufacturers will list peak to peak as the only form of X-Max, which is also the wrong way about doing it. It should only be one way. But alas, this cannot meet the X-Max spec that they have provided. Physically not possible. So now we're going to measure the specs and see if it matches anything at all.